Welcome to 10th or Tuesday, episode 7, I believe. We've been on about a 2-month absence since Thanksgiving, then Christmas and New Year's, and I wanted to welcome you and thank you for watching. We're into nullification season now here at the beginning of 2017, where we're already tracking close to 200 bills to reject unconstitutional federal acts on issues from surveillance to gun control, asset forfeiture, hemp prohibition, and a lot more. And first, before we talk about some of what I think are the, model bills in a number of genres, I wanted to welcome my cohort, TAC Communications Director Mike Maharrey, to kind of go over what we mean by nullification season. Because without you, I don't know how we'd be in the game.
Nullification season, yeah. So here we are in the very beginning of it, and people might ask, well, why do you call it nullification season? You know, is it like an official thing like deer season or a football season? It almost is, and we just call it that because this is the time of year that the vast majority of state legislatures are in session and actually doing work. Most of the legislatures in the United States are actually part-time, so you know they're not doing business all year round.
Right.
So the vast majority of bills get passed between the months of January and April. Some of them will go into May. And then there's a few that will linger on throughout the year. But this is the busy time. So this is where we put the nose to the grindstone. And like you said, we've already got 200 bills, and I've been trying to crank out bill reports, and I've got a whole stack of them to get through.
Yeah, and I didn't tell you this yet, Mike, but I'm actually not giving you all of them. So,
I believe it. I believe it.
So here's how our process basically is. It's kind of a multi-step process, just so you guys know what we do behind the scenes. Every day, just about, I go through and I have a spreadsheet where I have links to all the state legislature pages, and I go through all the bills that are filed in every single state, and it is absolutely awful. A vast majority of them. This is the part of my job that I absolutely cannot stand. I mean, the lights of hope, the positive things are what drives me. But to look through all the different ways that governments try to control people's actions can be a little bit depressing. But when I get to, after I've gone through 50, 60, 70 bills like I did last night for Oregon. Actually, I think it was about 500 bills because their filing just started. And I finally found one. And Mike, I just sent you a task to write a report on this to ban, I believe it was stingray spine. I'm like, okay, awesome. This work was worth it because so then we keep track of that, and I have a way of finding out whether there's going to be any action on it. I send it to you, Mike. You write a report on it, explain what's going on, let people know what the bill does and how they can support it. And the more that people know about it, the more likely they are to contact state legislators to push them to pass it. So we actually just try to do a lot of light shining on this legislation. And Mike, you've been so essential over the last few years in doing this.
Yeah, it's a huge job, and once it gets to me, that's only the very beginning of the tip of the iceberg, because then I get to read through 15 pages of legalese and try to figure out is this.
Well, I'm
really
only skimming them a lot of times, as you know, and so what's been good is the way that we work together is I find some kind of keyword after my mind's gone to mush, looking at a million bills controlling people. I see something positive, and sometimes I send you something. I'm like, hey, Mike, this is a great bill. We should report on this. And you're like, no, after reading through the 15 pages or so, this is junk. Here's why. Well, and then sometimes, and what I'd actually like us to do as we grow, and it's not just you and me, Mike. We also have TJ Martinell, Shane Trejo, other folks that help us out, Kelly Sladek, that do some reporting, just that you're doing a vast majority of them, Mike. What I would like to see us do in the future is also spend more time, and we've done a little bit this year, especially focusing on the Real ID Act, how states are actually trying to help. There's a number of bills around the country this year and last year where states are going to help the federal government implement that unconstitutional program. I'd like to see 10th Amendment Center alert people of bad stuff happening on the states in the future as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because like you said, the whole key is to make people aware of what's
Right.
going on so they can get involved. They can call their state senator, their state representative, and say, hey, I support this or I don't support this, and here's why. And they're going to be amazed when you call them and actually know what's going on and understand the intricacies of a bill, because they don't get a lot of those phone calls. So we can have a whole lot of impact by doing this. That people will just pick up the phone and take that 10 minutes to make that phone call.
Right. And as we get going, we'll also be updating our tracking pages. We have not been doing that as early as we normally do this year. And Shane Trejo, if you're watching, that's incumbent upon you. You're going to have a few hundred action alert posts to be writing in the near future. But this is also, and I harp on this in our emails, why it's so important that we have a few bucks from people a month to support our membership program at 10thAmendmentCenter.com/members, because if Mike and myself and then Shane, if we're spending 30, 40 hours a week just doing this part of the job, and that's only a small part of what we do here, there's no way to do that if we don't have a little bit of money to pay for the bills. So the couple of bucks a month over at 10thAmendmentCenter.com/members does a lot. But moving forward, Mike, and we're definitely not going to get in under our normal 10-ish minutes today, but I wanted to go over some of the bills that I think provide a model for other states to take action so people are aware of what's going on. You reported on a bill in Connecticut, of all places, House Bill 5138 from Representative Robert Sampson to withdraw the state from implementation in any way from Obamacare.
Yeah, that's a great bill, and it's one of those bills too. It wasn't 15 pages;
Right.
It was a really short. It was a really short
Barely
bill.
15
Basically
words,
just says,
right?
Yeah, we're not doing anything. We're not going to participate in the implementation of this program at all. And really, this is the key to bringing down Obamacare. I've been seeing some chatter on the Facebook and social media today that it looks like the Senate might not have the votes to repeal Obamacare, and so instead of worrying about what Congress does, we can take this kind of action at the state level and essentially repeal it in effect. When the states don't take any action to implement it, it's not going to get implemented because the federal government doesn't have the resources to do it.
Yeah, and that's what Judge Andrew Napolitano said a few years ago when reporting for Fox News on a similar bill in South Carolina that got close but didn't make it. He said if a number of states, I think the number he came up with was like 12 to 15 states did this, it would, quote, gut Obamacare. So if the states gut it, and let's say this Congress doesn't fully repeal it, but they kind of weaken it a little bit, they're going to have to do something. I think the pressure is on, they'll do something. But that combination is going to be really effective. So some people want us to wait for Congress to do it. Oh, let's see what Rand Paul does, for example. Well, Rand may do a great job in pushing the message, but if he doesn't get some help, he can't do it himself. So it's essential to have this kind of multi-prong, what is it? It's a pincer attack, right?
Right, exactly. And the pressure comes from the bottom up. When Congress sees a bunch of states taking action, it's going to pressure them to take action as well. They're politicians; they don't want to look bad, they want the credit. So if states start taking this kind of action, I think it'll flow. The power and the pressure will flow uphill.
Absolutely. Now, moving to South Carolina, there was a bill introduced by Representative Todd Rutherford. He's the minority leader in the state house. It's House Bill 3286 that fully bans the acquisition of Stingray devices. These are these cell site simulators, Mike, that you've reported on so much for us at 10th Amendment Center and our offnow.org project that spoof cell phone towers. Tell us a little about that bill.
Yeah, that's another great bill, and another one that was less than a page, which you kind of get a theme here. The less words that there are, usually the better the bill is. And it just outright completely bans the use of these Stingray devices by law enforcement. The Illinois bill that passed last year, I thought that was a really solid bill because it required a warrant for tracking locations using stingrays and then banned using stingrays to listen to communications. But this one actually goes even a step farther and just completely bans the devices. And I think that's ultimately what needs to be done. There's a lot of the ACLU and a lot of the privacy organizations that you'll talk to those folks, and they'll tell you that there's really no way to operate those things within the constraints of the Fourth Amendment because they suck up every bit of communication in the area that they're being operated. There's just no way to use those in a way that protects privacy. So the best thing to do is ban them completely. So this bill is outstanding.
My friend Hamid Khan from the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, he's, I don't know, I'm going to guess he's a Marxist. He's a far left, but he's a very good man. He works very hard for what he believes in. And on some issues, we can agree. And I'm sure on a lot of them, he and I will not. But he really hit me hard. I was at a conference, a privacy event speaking, where he was also on a panel. He hit me hard, as well as ACLU and a number of other people, Restore the Fourth. I'm being basically wusses on surveillance. He's saying, you guys want to regulate these drones. We were talking about drones, for example. You guys want to regulate them and hope that they follow the rules. He's like, no matter what they do, you cannot trust these people with this type of equipment until we can have proof that they actually will follow the rules. We should just not even let them have it. So in a way, Rutherford's bill in South Carolina is following that approach. I agree with it in philosophically. Whether or not we can actually get that type of thing to happen all the time, I will take a small step. I will accept the small step if it comes up, but this is it's a really good approach in my opinion. So House Bill 3286 in South Carolina. Another bill that you were reporting on down in Texas, Mike, and this is a really cool thing because you did some previous reports on the Right to Try Act in Texas. This is a bill or a law that's now enacted in, I believe, close to 33 some odd states. I
think it's 33.
It's from the Goldwater Institute originally. Basically, it's saying that the FDA doesn't allow people to try experimental treatments, even if they're on their deathbed. So it's basically a state passing a law saying that, okay, if you've got a terminal illness, we're going to let you try this. And there were some positive things that happened in Texas after they passed that into law too.
Yeah, exactly. And this new bill that they're coming, this actually, and I don't know the bill number, I'm sure you have it there in front of you, but it actually takes the whole thing a step further. And instead of only allowing people that have terminal illnesses to try these experimental treatments, it would actually allow people that have what do they call it? Chronic illnesses. Yeah. So greatly expanding the pool of people that would have access to various treatments that they don't have access to now. And this is a prime example of a bill, a small step leading to a bigger step, because Texas took the step a year and a half ago, or in their last session, I guess it was 2 years ago, went into effect a year and a half ago. They took that step to allow that for terminally ill patients, and they saw the success of it. There's already been like 78 cancer patients that have accessed treatments that were going to be cut off had this state not passed.
Has anybody died from trying those yet? Or is it?
There's no reporting of anybody dying from actually taking the treatment. In fact, the treatment has been very successful. Okay. So here we have, we're taking the next step. They say, okay, we took this small step. This worked. Let's take a bigger step. So, that kind of goes back to what you were talking about with the stingrays. Sometimes those small steps, while they may not be everything that we want, they can lead to those to the next step in the process and an erosion of federal power, and that's ultimately what we want.
That's House Bill 661 in Texas from Representative Tan Parker that expands the law, the Right to Try Act, that's already helped out 78 people in defiance of FDA restrictions, which would just let them die. FDA kills people. Moving forward over to New Hampshire, more on some surveillance anti-surveillance activity. I guess we could call it a very, what we've been working on for a number of years, a Fourth Amendment Protection Act from Representative Neil Kirk and Representative Carol McGuire. It's House Bill 171. Mike, this is personally my favorite. We worked on this bill for a long time, and I think it's going to be more and more important in the years to come. In fact, that same conference that I was at where Hamid Khan was giving me crap about drone regulations, there was a reporter there. I forget the paper, the tech paper that he was writing for, a blog, whatever it is that they call it these days. But he was basically saying, oh, here's all these great people, and then this neo-Confederate talking about nullification. Who's this evil person? And I just gave a warning. I said, hey, when you get down to it, when you guys start, and I agreed with Hamid that we can't trust these people. But when you get down to it, when Congress or the courts don't stop NSA surveillance, you're going to need the states. Eventually, we're going to be that Band-Aid that people are going to be asking for. And I think this bill in New Hampshire is extremely important.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this bill being introduced. It basically bans any cooperation with a federal entity that is engaging in warrantless surveillance.
The phrase, Mike, is the state cannot provide, quote, material support or resources. And that's a
Right.
very important phrase that they used in the Patriot Act. We can do a show on that and why that's important sometime in the future. But that's a huge deal, basically saying that they're not going to assist in any way these, we'll just call them spying terrorists.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we'll do, there was a really good article that talks about how all of these local surveillance things tie together into the federal surveillance state. And I'll find one of those articles and link to it in the notes for this video, so people can kind of see just how much impact a bill like this could have, just in limiting things at the state level, how much that feeds into the federal level. And by cutting that off, you can drastically hinder what's going on with this unconstitutional and immoral spying on everybody in the United States. And then, of course, it also deals directly with these facilities. If New Hampshire passes this bill, it's going to make it much less likely that the NSA would ever want to locate a facility within the state, because they may not be able to get the resources they need, such as electricity, water.
So we know for a fact that the NSA is continually expanding. We just got a report from The Intercept of a secret spy hub in New York that went online. I don't know how recently, but no one really knew about it. So the more that states say that, hey, we're not going to provide you water or electricity or general resources to operate this facility, the less likely it is they're going to be able to expand. So we want to box them in as much as possible, refuse participation in their programs, and protect privacy as much as possible on a state and local level, especially when Congress and federal agencies and the courts just aren't going to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving over to Missouri, there's a number of bills, 3 or 4 bills to legalize hemp farming. One was from Senator Rob Schaaf, Senate Bill 120, and another that came in from Paul Kurtman, who I think is a really good guy. I don't have the bill handy. I think it's House Bill 170. Now, these are one of these bills that are longer, and it's a step forward. They're allowing hemp in certain kind of parameters, but I think it's a positive step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The point people need to get through their head is that essentially what you're
Mike,
doing
you're
is
rough today.
I am. It's harsh. It's winter. It's winter in Kentucky. What do you expect? But the important thing to understand, because I guess I say that, and that came out kind of harsh, because we do get pushback on these things.
Yes.
We get the argument that, well, they're putting in more regulations and it's just more laws at the state level, and there's some truth to that.
Certainly
but
is,
what it does, it eliminates one layer of prohibition.
Yes.
Right now in Missouri, you've got 2 layers of prohibition. The state prohibits the cultivation of industrial hemp, and then the federal government prohibits it. Well, if you get rid of that first bigger layer of prohibition, that just leaves the federal prohibition, which they really have a hard time enforcing by themselves. And it opens the door to create markets, and it allows people to take that very slight risk that the federal government might interfere.
And once people learn that hemp seed is used in granola and in oil products and as a fiber supplement, and it's not something that's going to kill everybody, the world's not going to come to an end. They see this actually happening in their neighborhoods or in the farm down the street. I guess down the road is the proper term, then they're going to be less likely to oppose measures to expand on that in the future. And we've seen this happen. We're seeing this happen on the Right to Try Act. We saw that in response to drone spying over a few years in Florida. It's possible we'll see some actions on this in hemp in Colorado, in Oregon, and elsewhere. So I think this is a very good step forward in Missouri. Senate Bill 120 and House Bill, I just said it, 170 from Paul Kurtman there in Missouri. Another issue that I think is really important it's similar to the Obamacare issue, I think, in that we have a Republican Congress and a president who claims to be opposed to Common Core. I think Donald Trump, it's very clear he's opposed to Common Core. He wants to get rid of it. I don't trust any politician. I don't trust any elected official, but I think on that one, he is very sincere about getting rid of it. But it's going to take quite a bit from a lot of establishment Republicans in Congress to do the job, and the president can't do it himself. And I absolutely do not trust Congress to do the job. That's why this bill, there's a bunch of them. House Bill 279, Senate Bill 2035, House Bill 357. There's probably another one or two, a bunch of bills that have been filed to withdraw the state of Mississippi from Common Core. So if no one participates, Common Core doesn't exist.
Yes, exactly. And what I like about these bills, too, is the way they're written. They generally not only do away with the Common Core standards, but they also assert that the state has control over its educational standards.
Oh, did it say that specifically?
I'm pretty sure
that's awesome.
I'm pretty sure that was the Mississippi bill.
Okay.
There's been a couple of Common Core bills, and don't quote me on this, but I'm almost certain that Mississippi was one of them, where the legislature has to approve any future educational standards.
Okay.
And of course, that doesn't guarantee that you're not going to get some national standards down the road, but it does add a layer of security. And there is a mentality throughout these bills that the state is going to control its education and not the federal government.
That's good.
So definitely a step forward.
Moving over to Indiana, where there's been a bunch of bills. There's one that really we got a lot of attention on, just posting yesterday about nullifying the EPA. But I want to talk more specifically. We'll cover that bill in the future. We're expecting another one in Iowa on EPA, so we'll cover that sometime in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. But a bill in Indiana to take on policing for profit, that's asset forfeiture. The bill is Senate Bill 8 from Senator Phil Boots. Tell us a little bit about that, Mike.
Yeah. Well, the important thing to remember about the asset forfeiture bills whenever you start looking at reform at the state level is it's absolutely imperative that they close a loophole that allows state and local law enforcement agencies to essentially pass off cases to the federal government and allow the federal government to do the asset forfeiture and then do their equitable sharing and send the money back to the state.
Right.
It's basically a runaround. So you could have these great state reforms, but if this loophole exists, the police are going to ignore them. They're just going to pass it off to the feds and then collect up to 80% of the money once the federal government does the forfeiture under its much looser rules.
That's exactly what was happening here in California. California actually had some of the surprisingly strongest restrictions against asset forfeiture in the state level anywhere. It had a really good law in place. But the police were like, oh, okay, well, if we just work with our federal partners, that's the term they always use.
Yes.
If we work with our federal partners, they start a case, then they say, well, this is a federal case now. Then they turn it over to the federal agent. They still do the work on the ground. They're basically the brunt of the work. And then they get 80% of the cash that the feds keep, and they just did an end run around it. That's why it's essential to close that loophole. Of all people, Jerry Brown signed a bill to close it in most situations that just went into effect January 1st. A number of other states are starting to take that action: New Mexico, Nebraska, Ohio, and that's why this bill in Indiana to close that loophole, like another in Missouri, is so important on reining that process in.
Yeah, absolutely. An interesting thing about the Indiana bill, in the current asset forfeiture law, there's actually a process in their statute that allows them to do this passing off to the federal government. Like they have a process that the police can go through. So what this bill actually does is it removes that process and would make it so that they can no longer do that. They would have to keep it within the state system.
Okay, and then one more today that I want to talk about, and it's an essential part of any nullification strategy, is jury nullification. So, there's always going to be people that get caught up in the system, and juries are kind of like the last line of defense. So once someone's been arrested, thrown into a cage, and charged with some crime in quotes, we'll put it, juries can actually acquit them even if the facts say that they violated the law in question. And this has been used, and we've got some videos on it on our YouTube channel, how it was used against federal slavery laws, in more modern times against marijuana laws. And this bill, House Bill 133, in New Hampshire from State Rep Dan Itza, who's long been a strong state sovereignty and 10th Amendment supporter, a leader really in this movement since day one in more modern times. This would require courts to, quote, inform the jury of its right to judge the facts and the application of the law in relation to the facts in controversy. In New Hampshire, they're calling it a jury instruction bill. We can call it whatever we want. The end result is that courts will be required, if this law passes into law, will be required to tell the juries that they can actually say, hey, even if the facts say they violated the law, you can vote to acquit.
Exactly. And really what this is doing, when you really get down to it, is it's putting the justice back in the justice system. The justice system was designed not just to apply unseeingly, the words of a statute. It was designed to impart justice. And in a situation where the law is treating an individual unjustly, a jury absolutely should have the right to look at that and say, you know what, we're not going to apply these words, these strict interpretation of these statute to this situation. And so it's another one of these nice simple bills. It just requires that the judge inform the jury that they can do this, so that the jury is fully informed of the powers that it has.
Absolutely.
So I love this approach.
I do want to give a shout out to Fully Informed Jury Association, which is the leading group on this type of an effort, FIJA.org. It's important that people follow that organization and support them. And just wrapping it up here, next week, I do want to focus that we've got a number of bills to reject federal gun control in the states. And some people have already told us, well, what's the point? You don't need that. And I think I want to have a conversation with you, Mike, next week on the show, unless something big happens in between, on why it's important to still set that foundation, even if we don't expect any new gun control to be coming down the line from Washington, D.C., because there is certainly quite a bit on the books already that needs to be rejected too. But we can talk about that a little bit more next week. Mike, thank you so much for spending time. Thank you for watching us here, 10th or Tuesday, episode 7. And make sure you go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/members to get involved and support this effort. Thanks again for watching.